What major or minor decision are you procrastinating on making? Is it a decision to decide exactly how much money you want to make? How about a decision to move your location to another state? Well, how about a decision to marry, have children, change jobs? What about a very small decision to put on your sneakers and take that walk every single day, maybe 10, 15 minutes? How about a decision to become health conscious? What about money conscious? Good morning. My name is Ann McNeil, and I am, yes, I am the master wealth builder, helping you to build a stronger and better life and business. And welcome to the Think and Grow Rich Mastermind live podcast. Today, we have another phenomenal podcast for you and a great guest. But we're not going to get to that so quickly because we want you to make sure you have subscribed to the YouTube channel. We also want to encourage you to comment, like, and share this podcast with your friends because our special guest is none other than Miss Laura IBARRA. And when we began to introduce her, you will make a decision to remove all excuses from your vocabulary. But what is a decision? Napoleon Hill tells us in this phenomenal book, Think and Grow Rich, that this principle of decision is actually the mastery of procrastination. Can I say that again? This principle of decision, he calls it the mastery of procrastination. And he also calls it the seventh step to riches. And I can just say that in my own business and my life, I am beginning to realize it's not the very large decisions that need to be made. It's the very, very, very small decisions. And I'm finding also that when there is a lack of decision, it's called indecision. And that indecision can turn into fear over time. That's what procrastination does. But Napoleon Hill shares that he interviewed over 25,000 men and women, and they experience failure, but it comes down to what we call the 30 major causes of failure. We'll talk about that at another point. But I would be remiss if I continued to pursue this conversation without introducing our special co-host. Let me welcome Dr. Peter James. Good morning, Dr. James. How are you?
Good morning there, Emmanuel. I thought you had decided to continue down this chapter without me. I was so intrigued for sure. I'm excited to be here with you all this morning. My name is Dr. Peter A. James. And I, another great chapter in this book, one of the ones that we always say, is such a phenomenal one of my favorites for sure. But in this chapter, Napoleon Hill says so many things. Example, procrastination, the opposite of decision, right? Which is one of the biggest things that we as human beings, we often struggle with, right? There's always something in our lives, in our worlds, in our businesses, in our careers that we are procrastinating on. And then Napoleon Hill also goes on to say opinions are the cheapest commodities on earth. Can I say that again? Opinions are the cheapest commodities on earth, but the decisions that you make are the ones that are going to be powerful today and moving forward. And if you look back in history as well, you'll see the decisions that you made have helped you get on the trajectory that you are on today, or the lack thereof. So, Anne, I'm excited to dive on in to this conversation today. We have a phenomenal guest, and I'm looking forward to having this dialogue with everyone that is going to be in the YouTube world today as well.
All right. All right. All right. All right. Oftentimes we hear uh, opinions. You mentioned this.
Mhm.
Oftentimes we hear the opinions of others, and if we're not careful, if we hear them long enough, we will begin to think that they are our own. And I say that again. If we hear it long enough, and if we're not careful, we will begin to think that certain decisions that we've made are actually our own decisions, but they were the decisions of others that have been shared with us. They are encouraged to, over time, subliminally induce us to do that which others think that we should do. Well, let me just take a moment and introduce all of you to our very special guest this morning. And I thought it was very interesting as we were preparing for the podcast and we were talking back in the studio, and our guest was sharing, and I'll just go ahead and I don't want to get ahead of you, Laura, but our guest was sharing about how she has made a decision to not only study to show herself approved, but her studying is leading her to not only have one master's degree, not only to have two master's degree, but our special guest, Miss Laura IBARRA, and I hope I'm saying that correct, is an accomplished business strategist, a brand architect, and editorial expert who holds two master's degrees and a master's in strategic design and innovation, and is currently pursuing her doctorate in social research. Welcome to the podcast. Good morning, Laura. How are you this phenomenal morning?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm so excited. I was like, who is this girl? Oh, it's me. So I'm so happy to be here with you guys. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. Laura, we were talking earlier. I'm actually signing in from Wise, Virginia as a part of the Napoleon Hill Foundation certification course as one of the instructors.
Yeah.
And we want to thank you for being willing to come. We just had one of your friends on a week or so ago,
Yeah.
and nice to meet you here virtually. But can you share with us a little bit about your journey? Go back as far as you would like when you first began to, first I want to talk about the introduction to this principle and this book, but then also once you do that, we'll talk about some major decisions that you are making and have made along the way. So what was your first introduction to this phenomenal book, Think and Grow Rich?
Thank you, Anne, for the question. And the first thing that came to my mind was the decision to be here. Because maybe you don't know this, I'm from Mexico. So English is my second language. And when I received your information on Facebook, like, would you like to be part of this podcast? Of course, I was like afraid, but at the same time, yes, I want to do it. So for you to know, this is my first interview in English going live. So I'm just excited. And I think decision takes courage, of course. And as we go deep into the study of Napoleon Hill, we can pick so many insights. Every single line, it's a jewel. So what I remember the first time I read Think and Grow Rich in English, for me was a little bit confusing, and I was getting lost in translation, to be honest. The first sentence that says, and I have a lot of my books here, but the mastery of procrastination in my mind, because I hold master degree, I say, okay, mastery for me is something that you get perfection on. So I'm going to be the perfect procrastinator. No, I was totally wrong. So when I read it, the accurate translation is like overcoming that procrastination habit. So how we do that is by going back to the principle. So for me, it's all connected. It's like a ladder. So when you have this real burning desire, which my burning desire was to be he, show up. And regardless my way of speaking or my anxiety, and sometimes is this is my will. So I want to pursue that. That's why I took the decision. And then of course, some of the next things that we need to know, we need to do is take action. Because if you just make a decision, but okay, later on, that means that you don't have the real burning desire for that. That's a mean key that I got from Napoleon Hill, that every time I realize I'm procrastinating is because either there is no real burning desire or there is a fear, a huge fear. And he explains in detail, like the 6 fears we have. Sometimes we avoid taking those decisions because we don't want to be hurt. Of course, we want to be safe all the time, and our brain is protecting us every single time. But then, if you don't make any decision, regardless, life is going to push you, and maybe it's going to be harder, and it's going to take you for the not so kind road in life. So I think getting into the making decision zone is a mastery of practicing. So I can tell for myself that I was reflecting about the procrastination, and my college degree is in graphic design, so that's my background. And I don't know how I connected this idea that in order to be creative, I need to rush to the deadline. Like, okay, I need to create a logo, so I'm gonna go some drafts, take time, relax, meditate, whatever. And then 2 hours before I need to deliver, it was like, okay, I was rushing because I feel the rush. So the adrenaline sometimes is addictive. So I was pushing towards procrastination, quoting that as a creative process. But believe me, now that I mastered design as well, it's like, oh girl, no, that's not the point. So you can be creative, you can take your time, of course, but it's not a good practice because at the end of the day, the stress and of course not serving my client in a very high standard is going to take a lot of time and energy that is wasted. So that's where I come from, talking about procrastination and making decisions every single time.
Wow, thank you so much for that. Now, let's go back to the book.
Oh.
When you first picked up, when was the time and where were you and who introduced you to this book?
Okay, so I cannot relate who was it, but I do know I was hearing the principles on YouTube
Awesome.
back in let's say 2006,
Wow.
maybe. I was in Mexico. I was running my business. Masin is is my first baby enterprises. As a creative, I focus on wedding invitations, stationery, all the crafty stuff. So while I was printing and making like the cards and pasting and cutting, I was hearing. I had a lot of time with my partners to read through audio. So I found it, and now maybe I'm doing the connection. I was hearing a podcast. Yeah, it was a podcast, Gerardo Rodriguez podcast. It was a sales podcast related. So I think that was a link to draw me to YouTube. And then I hear the principles in Spanish because English was not an option for me. Not really. When I graduate, I say, I'm done with English. I don't need English anymore. So, and here I am, right? So that was my first approach. And then going back to the connections, and people recommend every single time I run into Bob Proctor as well. And lately, I have been blessed to be connected with a huge community through Money and You program, which is a huge place. It's actually a self-development business summit. Is amazing. It's an amazing experience. I'm blessed to be a graduate from that. And then most of the people were either talking about the book or people like Sharon Lecter and Dame Doria and all these big names. And I was like, oh my God, this is the source. So let me go back and revisit. And that was the first time I read it in English because it's kind of different. The first time I read it, I hear it. For me, it was a little bit like, okay, this is an old book. They are talking about men. It was like a little bit of, okay, I'm gonna give it a try. But then I picked a new version and even the woman version. So now it for me was okay, I can conceal with this book. Now I feel it's more empathy with the woman that we can have this too. It was just because it was a book almost 100 years ago, right? So I understood why it was reading that way. So now I just love. I have multiple copies. Every time I had an opportunity, I gifted to someone.
Awesome. Awesome. Dr. James, I see you leaning forward there.
No, actually, and I wanted to begin to introduce, before we dive into the conversation with Laura, I have so many questions for her about her journey. But before we dive into that a little bit, I wanted to chat about this video that we tee up every single week. This video about Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and it kind of gives an overview of these 13 steps, these 13 principles, these 13 chapters, and allows us to be able to dissect them a little bit. Those of you who are watching, I encourage you to listen in and identify, where might you need to level up, take your life, career, business to the next level? What part of these principles, which of these principles might you need to dig into a little bit more? Because it gives a great overview, a great insight. Of course, today we're diving into decision, but there's so much more than just decision. So definitely please give it a listen.
Number 1 is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step 2 is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the mastermind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the wild, wild west days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
All right, Dr. James, your question was?
Yeah, good stuff. Great. Of course, the principles are so fabulous. Laura, thank you so much again for joining us today. And thank you so much for sharing how you were introduced into this phenomenal book. I guess my follow-on question now is, this book has so much that we can apply to our lives, we can apply to our businesses, our careers. How do you believe that Think and Grow Rich has been relevant in your life, career, or business, whichever you desire to go? How do you think it really has infiltrated who you are to a certain extent?
Thank you, Pierre. I can relate in different stages. So the first thing that I can address is the time that I was making the decision to buy my house in Mexico. So through the podcast, actually, it was giving me like some ideas. But then when I heard like, okay, you need to put the principles in order. So I can relate like having that desire. And then as an entrepreneur, sometimes you don't get the credit enough to get it. So I was, okay, that comes the fate, right? So I need to move on. I'm gonna think that I can do this. Everything moves around. It's unbelievable. I sometimes fail into overthinking when I want to achieve something and then I want to put together all the plan. And then, oh no, I cannot move forward because I'm lacking of this or those things, wherever. And then when you don't plan ahead to the three step or more, the resources came to you. So sometimes you just need to release that part and receive, okay, this is a good path. So randomly that time, I got a huge amount of money through my account because my brother was making a business. We were in a collaboration. So suddenly my credit was right up. And then that was exactly the time the bank was checking in my account. So guess what? 2 weeks later, I received a call like, your loan is granted. And I remember that particular time I was with my collaborator, Lupita, and she was looking at me because I was in the phone and I started like crying, like, okay, thank you very much, blah, blah. I don't remember what I say, but my tears were like, and she was like, what is going on? I mean, you're crying, but you're happy. Like, tell me more about that, right? So I told her, I don't know how, but I'm going to be a homeowner. So out of the blue, the resources were there. And going back in the story, I was rented that house. So when I decide to move to the States, I say, what is the point to get in my house? I already got my car. So I pursued that because it was my burning desire. Everything came together. The landlord took my car as the upfront payment. So don't you think that was out of the blue amazing? Like I was fulfilled. Of course, I need to pay every single month my mortgage, but I came into the States being a homeowner, so I was like beyond happy. And I think I was as Luis Jimenez, my coach, he always told me, you were a unconscious, what is the term of that? That the people who doesn't know what it's doing, but you're doing the right thing and feeling the path. So I was like, yeah, I can relate to that experience. So now that I see how is the process, now I'm mastering in doing it every single time, because sometimes we forget. Sometimes we're procrastinator anyways. So, okay, let's go back to the basics. What I'm missing here, right?
Yeah, and I love that. And I hear the basics is back to the book, to the basics there for sure. So I'm gonna pass it back to Anne. Before I do, though, I want to make sure I acknowledge everyone on YouTube who is listening in today. I see Wyman, Shannon, Carla. Good morning to you all. Luis, good to see you as well. You just got a shout out a little while ago. Colette, Johnny Lloyd. Hey there, Johnny Lloyd, Imelda. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us and participating and diving into this decision topic of Think and Grow Rich, and very robust conversation.
Oh my goodness, Lisa, oh my goodness, you just showed all of us and reminded me in particular about how do you actually utilize the principles, starting with principle number 1 in Think and Grow Rich with desire. Because when you shared about how you stepped into, first the desire was to have the house. And the decision to do that, you had to go back to the principle of desire.
Yeah.
And you walked us through the principle of faith. And so when you began to do that for one area of your life, you can also do it for other areas of your life. And I think for many of us, it is a constant reminder of why we do this podcast every single week, no matter what, because we're all making decisions and we can procrastinate, of course. And there is some truth and honesty and authenticity in admitting we all do procrastinate from time to time. And that rush you talked about, I'm saying to myself in the back, I'm saying, oh, yeah, that's me. That's me. But at the same time, it is not as effective, if you will, as it could be when I think it inhibits creativity.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm an early riser and I like to, get up earlier so that I can have the time. But the decision to do that is not always as easy as just saying it. So I want to go back to a question I have for you that, as much as you'd like to share, you're writing a book and you've made a decision to share certain aspects of your life in that book. Could you share with our audience some of those decisions, the tough decisions you've had to make as a part of that process, starting with your desire?
Thank you. Yeah, it's an anthology book, so it means that it's a collection of stories. The title of the book is The Essence of a Woman, Unleashing the Feminine Soul. And I was invited through one of my dearest friends, Dr. Jody Bear. She's part of the Healthpedia publishing, and they already create a book about health and wellness, but this time they want to focus on stories, because we know we learn through stories. So what great idea to put together like these 6 pillars: spiritually, mentally, physically, emotional, social, and finance. And I'm giving you this context because I was invited to be part of the mental mindset pillar. So long story short, she invited to me. And then I say, okay, now I'm going to be an author in English for real. I mean, I was making my peace with English, right? So it took a time to develop like the courage, because the imposter syndrome right away was behind me. Like, who you are to tell your story, right? But then I was reflecting, okay, how I can address the mindset. And again, go to the basics. Think and grow rich. So this is not the one. This is the one. Mel Robbins is a good one too, by the way. So I was, okay, let me connect the story. But then, as we mentioned, procrastination came. Oh, I have my due date in May. I was invited for a project to be in France, actually attending the Cannes Festival with a client. So I flew to Cannes and I told myself, you need to write this story in France. What a great story to tell. Like I was becoming an author in Europe, right? So we work all day. It was crazy time having meetings with investors, and all of the sudden I was riding a flight going back to the States, and I put on my screen, okay, some of the screens of the flight, you can see actually the plane moving. So I was, okay, I say to myself while I'm in France. So I took my notebook and I started reading that chapter. So I put together at least 3/4 of that chapter, and I realized I was sharing my immigration story because I could relate that story with my PhD, which is about all the challenges that for Latin women when they come to the state under a certain kind of visa, which is a dependent one. That means that you have all your rights. The only thing you are not allowed to do is to work. And I came here super excited. I got married with that wonderful man. He took me into a journey of amazingness. But I never clicked that idea. I was a business owner. I got my house, I got my car in Mexico. Most of the people will say I was succeeding back there, right? So when I came, I was like, now what? Watch Netflix and chill all the time? And every time I was flying back to Mexico and come back to the States, every single time the immigration person asked me, and what do you do? Oh my God, that was the hardest question to answer because of course I want to say, oh, I'm working, I'm leading my business in Mexico, but I couldn't. So I just need to smile and okay, I'm a housewife now. So it for me was super frustrating every time I was crossing the border. Okay, I cannot work, so I cannot say that. It's gonna jeopardize our journey because we were in the journey to get a green card. Now I'm blessed to I have my permanent resident now. I'm allowed to work now. But for 5 years, it was my journey. So it took me in a roller coaster of emotions, getting my mindset straight. That's why I connected with so many communities, doing networking from this very spot. So at the beginning, I didn't have a car, and my English skills were like basic. So I was not working all the time online, like doing this with you. And sometimes I was in rooms that I couldn't understand anything. And when people asked me things, I was like, yes, no, I don't know. But I was blessed enough to be in rooms that where we were talking about Think and Grow Rich, Money and Your Principles, even Buckminster Fuller, which now for me is, wow, one of my biggest idols on earth. And learning all these principles and being part of these places allowed me to become a speaker in the new psychology of winning from Dennis Waitley, with the Los Angeles Tribune, which I'm so blessed to be part. And they granted me 5 minutes live on television alongside Bob Proctor, Dennis Waitley, Brian Tracy, which for me was like, okay, this is the God, this is the source of sales. So I was always learning about him. And can you imagine? I was like, now what? now I need to speak in English in front of a camera. So I put all my post-its on the screen. Okay, I need to talk about this, address this thing, and I cannot remember what I say. And I know I can back up to YouTube and watch my video, but I was so afraid that at this time, I'm gonna make sure that I watch again, but I couldn't. Like, oh, I made a lot of mistakes that back then, but for me it was like, okay, but that was not a big deal. So keep going, and now I think all the story, so part of the story that I just shared with you guys is on the chapter. At the end, they ask, what I love the most about this book is that they ask us to put action steps. So, okay, you gave us your story, but at the end of the chapter, each author is giving you like an action step, and you're kind of believe. What do you think this is a good idea to follow, right? So of course, go to the basics. I was addressing Napoleon Hill book, and that was it. Actually, I just came with a chapter. This very week they asked us, okay, let's move forward, get endorsements. It's gonna release August 8th. So for everyone who wants to get a copy, they can contact me, or even we're gonna be doing an online event to release that. And just to add up, I'm beyond grateful because one of the anchor authors is nonetheless Dr. Khalila Camacho Ali, Muhammad Ali's wife. We have Her Royal Highness Princess Moradro Olugana. She is a UN ambassador. And we have this amazing actress and comedian, Tiffany Haddish. So my story is along all of these women. So what can I ask? So I'm just asking for more blessings to bless more people. That's why the story came to my hands, and Peter. Thank you for asking.
And then we have, in addition, from none other than Queen Laura IBARRA. And we want to give a shout out to your #1 fan on YouTube, Lewis. Thank you so much, Lewis. He shared it was unconscious competence.
Oh yeah, thank you. I knew you were writing, but I didn't want to distract myself going to YouTube. So thank you. Unconscious what? Again?
Pardon me, he said it was unconscious competence.
Competent, yeah, unconscious competent.
Yes,
okay,
yes,
thank you.
yes. Oh my goodness, you share so much. I forgot I was on this side of YouTube, not the other side of YouTube, because I just settled in, a cup of coffee, and leaned back, and I was listening, and I was like, wait, and you're hosting the podcast. Come back. Phenomenal. We want to encourage everybody on YouTube. Thank you so very much for joining, but please remember to subscribe to the channel. And as Gayla Bingham always like to say, please make sure you click that bell.
Yeah.
Little bell on YouTube, and make a comment, but also share your questions that you may have for Laura. Laura, you are just amazing in your story and your journey. And I know that so many men and women are being blessed by your sharing your journey, because they can definitely relate. Now, Peter, I'm not sure if you have a question, but I do have another question that I think is a little sensitive, but I'm going to ask if you would like to share.
Yeah.
And that is about your 4 children, because when you make a decision, the way does present itself. But oftentimes, I think when we go through, it's not so much for us as it may be for others to be encouraged by us, through us, to know that if they can do it, I can do it too. So would you share the decision that you've made about your children?
Of course, and thank you for asking that question. For me, the way I see it, and just a disclaimer for my family, my children are in heaven, so you don't have any grandchildren. My great grandfather is willing to have that, increasing the family, right? So just a disclaimer, we have a lot of angels here. But yeah, when it comes the time when you need to plan a family, a lot of decisions you need to make, even practical, or this is a real long decision. So when I came to the States, I was actually creating my mastermind with my husband, right? Okay, we are the two of us. Where is the plan? I'm not working now, but what I'm doing to pursue my career, right? So it came a decision about, okay, let's plan for children, because we're not getting younger, although we're exercising and taking care of our health. Um, we felt that okay, this is a right time, so we start trying. And then the first time I knew I was pregnant, I was in Mexico, so I was feeling sleepy during Christmas time, and for me Christmas time is the best time at all, right? So I was like, oh, I cannot hold my sleep, so I need to go. And that's when I realized. Then I share with all my family, with all my friends. And then I went to the doctor, and then she realized, okay, you are indeed pregnant, but the egg is not evolving. So it took a lot of um, mind shift, because I already shared the good news with everyone. And I know people out there maybe relate to this story, or this is the reason that I didn't know why many people hold that good um good news for the people, because they wait until the 8 or 10 week. Right now I know, I learned in the hard way. So anyhow, then I need to tell everyone, okay, I'm not getting a baby, so I got pregnant. But explaining the process, it was painful, because I was in Mexico, my husband was working in the States. So imagine giving the news through Zoom. So I told him, okay, you're going to become a father through Zoom. And then I called, okay, no, it was a wrong call. So we're not getting a baby. So it took a moment to move on. And I don't believe that we were ready until like 1 year of the process, when we finally decide, okay, we need to, if that's our burning desire, if that's what we really want, we need to keep going. There's no way unless we go through adoption, right? For in my mind, it's always an opportunity. And then we try again. This time I was in the States, I was getting my checkups. Everything seems to be good, but at the 6th week, the pregnancy stopped. So again, going to the process again, it was difficult, because this time the baby was growing. So I actually needed a procedure. Well, not a procedure. I took some pills under the doctor's recommendation, but I took that part of my journey as as a very difficult one, because first of all, my English was not very proficient, and in the medical stuff, I was getting like, okay, I can say it was not as good as I wanted, as supportive as I wanted. And I came to my house with a lot of doubts. Like, now what? They gave me some medication, and then what I'm gonna do? So the healing process of that loss, I think, accumulated with the previous one. And then I felt I fall in a gap. So I was facing depression and anxiety. And I called for a psychologist, because I knew that it was not Laura anymore. I couldn't have this joy to shout up on with my clients and with my friends, and I was feeling bad. So again, a decision, okay, this is the time I need support. So I went back to my psychologist, this amazing lady from Mexico. She explained to me a lot of the basics of how the body responds, because when you have a miscarriage, you need to address that your body is going to a quarantine as well, because you got pregnant, and all your body, your hormones need to adjust the same way as if you got your baby right away. So for me, it was a new information. She also addressed to me like how I can balance my hormones, and then that I was not getting loosey, but it's just a process. It's a normal process that you need to relax, you need to eat better, she even recommend me, you know what, watch comedy, eat some cacao, is gonna turn out your metabolism. And like in 3 weeks, I was back in my state of mind. I was clear, and I was thinking why I didn't receive that information from the medical stuff, or who can I ask for that advice, because we usually don't speak about miscarriages. It's so common, but we don't speak about that. So every time I was sharing with a friend, I was shocked. Like, let's say from 10 people that I share, 8 told me, I already have that. And I did this and this and that. And I was like, you? I mean, I was surprised because there's a topic that we don't share. And the way I learned to heal my story and my mind was by sharing my story. So one day I was taking a shower, and then I received the name of the brief joy. So for me, it was the best way to address how I felt about being pregnant, because we try again with no success. So that's why I call always my 4 little angels. But then one friend give me the best gift or all that I want to share with you guys. She told me a story of a woman in Europe. It was her friend. She took 13 miscarriages. The 14th time she got her healthy baby. And because of the different mindset, I believe, she was an European, and this friend that shared with me, she's a Mexican lady. So she told me, in Mexico, we took this so hard, it's so painful, we don't want to try. But the mindset of that girl was, next time will be it, next time will be it. So she didn't bond it with the grief much, but like she took like a challenge or like a game, like, okay, next time, next time, next time. And I thought, if she was able to not suffer, to be fulfilled, of course, you need to feel the experience, you need to go through that. But if you have a different mindset, you can keep going regardless, because your desire is bigger. So I'm not saying that that's the way you want to go, but that's the mindset shift that I had from my second miscarriage. So the first time it took us 1 year to go back and, okay, try. And the next time we take it like, okay, this is nature. It's natural. Let's keep going, because if that's our goal, we can have it anyways. So I think that particular shift of mindset helped me a lot. And now what I'm doing is just sharing my story. I'm sharing a lot of stories here, I know, but that name, the brief joy, came to me like I want this to create, I want this to be a place to share resources. Because when I was in the pre-depression stage, I look for psychologists, I look for gynecologists, specialists in infertility. I look for priests. I look for pastors. I look for Mexican shamans, for people who read and the all the system and energies, Reiki. I went to all of them. So every single time I was getting advice, every advice was the same in a different realm. But for me, it was, this is the resource I want to give someone who is going through the process. Because regardless, you're not going to get um, the, the baby that you dream, but you can get to package that experience, as hard as I feel, but in a joyful way, like honoring the process. And I think that's the main reason I came with that name. I don't have a book yet. I don't have very I'm still working on the website, but that's the desire to share that story and to share resources for those men and women, because it's difficult for men as well to talk about this. And we are not getting pregnant alone. So men are included in this process too.
Oh my goodness, Laura, I would like to, first of all, let me thank you, and then let me encourage and inspire you to do this work. Wyman says in the chat on YouTube, he said, our bodies are a marvel of creation, fearfully and wonderfully made, they say. The more we know about it, the better equipped we are to optimize its performance. And when looking to optimize the performance of complex creation, it's best to consult its creator, whom Napoleon Hill refers to as the source of infinite intelligence. I'd like to encourage you also, consider starting a mastermind group for support. And I wrote down what you say, and you could even call it, if you would, Brief Joy. And in your description, this, of course, you would share that it's a place to share resources and package experiences in a joyful way, because I got a feeling that there are millions of people, male, female, and children, male, female, and children, male, female, and children, because many children, especially if they're an only child, they're looking forward to this child. And we never know the impact that this experience has on them later on in life, especially when a parent decides not to try anymore. So I am one of those believers that believe that all things truly do work together for good, and it's our pleasure and joy to look for the good in them. And sometimes it's not easy, but I believe that as a Napoleon Hill, I like to call myself the Think and Grow Rich mastermind, that we find a way through these principles to find the good in everything, because it is said that nothing is either good nor bad, but it is our thinking that makes it so. And I want you to know you have truly blessed us today, to the point to where we only have 5 minutes left in this podcast.
Talking
And
about not speaking English, right?
yes, no, you did wonderful. You did wonderful. And Wyman is still chatting in the chat. We want to make sure everybody else continues to chat in the chat.
Yes,
but,
please.
But let's go around and have everybody know how they can connect with you. And if there's anything that you want to share that you're doing, and then we'll go to Peter, and I'll go ahead and wrap up.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm gonna make sure to go to YouTube and check all the comments. So please keep commenting. And I'm gonna share the best way to connect with me is actually Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. I'm always on social media. So you can look me as Laura Ibarra Creative. So for some of us, I'm gonna write it down, because Ibarra, it's a tricky, a tricky to write. But then yeah, what I do lately is I love to connect with people, especially if you have a unique business that is related to all of these principles, but going beyond. I was blessed to create my business now that I got my official green card. Is Three Wins International. It's right there. So we all have heard about the win-win situation, right? That's the way to do business is a win-win. So when I learned from Money and You and Buckminster Fuller is that there is another force that we can integrate to this formula. So for me, the win-win-win stands for, if I can share with you something that is going to be useful and you can share with me, we're creating momentum. So with that force, we can direct that force to a third party, either is the society, either through education, making all the biggest world problems. So every time I'm getting a client, I always address that part in the business. If they are looking towards going to be sustainable or helping in a certain way to humanity, that's a good call for me. That's a kind of client I want to get, because I do business development, strategic design, and so on. So that's the way I'm moving towards lately. But yeah, I'm just happy to connect with people, meet new people and projects, because that's the way I got my English, by talking with people on Zoom. So anyone who wants to have a chat, please give me a DM.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. All right, Dr. Peter James, would you like to share about the annual meeting as you share about who you are and how people can connect with you? Or I can, it's your choice.
You're so easygoing today there, Ann. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Laura, this has been fabulous. Your story is riveting. And sometimes when we tell our story, we don't know or think how it lands on others. Please allow me to reinforce for you that your story, as you share it, is touching the world in some capacity, changing lives, shifting hearts to a certain extent as well. So please keep telling your story, because it's going to help someone who is out there. And definitely, even as it relates to Think and Grow Rich, I think it's a great connection for sure. Hey, folks, as you heard, as you're hearing in this conversation, there's power in conversation. As Laura mentioned, there's power in that dialogue that she loves to have. One of the ways that we love to do it here at the International Mastermind Association is by meeting annually for an accountability meeting. And we have one coming up. You think it's too early, but it's truly not. In January in Boca Raton, back to Boca Raton, Florida, we will be meeting once again to begin planning for our next year, but also for the rest of our lives, right? And we do that very strategically in this event. And we look forward to having you there for sure. There's the information there on the screen as you see there for sure. You can go to Eventbrite and type in Think and Grow Rich 2025 annual accountability meeting if you are desiring to jump on in. Please, it is not too early to schedule that for sure. Folks, this has been a phenomenal conversation around this decision topic. And sometimes we don't make decisions as we need to. And if that is you, or if you know someone who needs to be making better decisions in their career or in their future, I encourage you, Galen Bingham and myself, we are putting together an Own Your Career Challenge. And this is an opportunity for you to be able to identify, what is it I need to do to reframe or reset my career on the right trajectory as I see fit. Think and Grow Rich is a big part of this, as you see here for sure. But for only $97, you get 2 executive coaches in this process to be able to level up your career in the direction you can go. So please go to shiftyourmindset.com/own your career challenge. I'll make sure that I put that in the YouTube chat. And this is a great way to connect with me and Ann. This has been a phenomenal show just in general. I'm so excited. So, you know what, Ann, we have to have Laura back. But before we talk about that, we're going to make sure that we identify how to connect with Ann Neal as well.
Well, I was just listening to Laura and reading the chat. And when I saw Lewis, and I looked at Laura, and I looked at Lewis, and then I looked at Laura, and I had this phenomenal idea. And I'm going to decide, Lewis and Laura, to have a conversation offline with the two of you about bringing your group to our annual meeting in January. And let's have that larger vision conversation internationally, because we are the International Mastermind Association. And I cannot think of a better way to integrate this conversation and this philosophy than for us to collaborate, if you will. And I want to thank Johnny is on here, and both of us are here in Wise, Virginia, with Don Green and the entire certification process and students and instructors. And as Lewis, you know, this is family for so many of us. But I really think that there's a larger conversation we can have as we look at masterminding strategically, as Laura said, and collectively, because it really is for the betterment of and the good of others. And I went to run and get a copy of my book here, which is How to Start and Run an Effective and Profitable Mastermind Group. And this is really focusing on peer-to-peer, if you will, because we mastermind in the 10 different areas of our lives. It's not just money. And that's what I loved about your story today, Laura, because we're not just talking about making a decision about the money. Yes, I'm always talking about the money, but the money just makes us more of whoever we already are.
Exactly.
All it does. And if you'd like to connect with me and learn more, you can text the number 59925, and I'll put that in the chat on YouTube. Text the number 59925. And let's check that. Text the number 59925. And I will send back to you 59925. And in the chat, you would just put Ann in the chat. All right. ANN is my name. And I share that because, again, as we share who we are and what we do, we always want to make sure we give people a way to connect. And these podcasts are evergreen, and we don't know in the future, 5, 10, 20 years from now, people will come and they'll find Laura. So Laura, in the chat, just make sure people can find you. And same thing,
Yes.
Peter, let's make sure your website or something is in the chat and people can find you. This has been a phenomenal podcast. My name is Ann McNeil. I am the Master Wealth Builder, helping to build stronger and better lives and businesses. Laura and Peter, this was another promise kept. And so we want to thank everybody for joining in, all of you on online on the YouTube. Thank you so very much. And until next time, we would encourage you to remember to think and grow richer. And we'll see you next time. Everybody have a good day. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.